Opposition spokesperson Matt Vickers.
I'd like to thank you, Ms Buck, for chairing this debate today. This House has had a great many opportunities to discuss indefinite leave to remain and its impact on people, including debates in this place on consequential matters such as those working in the healthcare sector and BNOs. Underpinning all these debates is the principles of what factors constitute a fair migration system and what does not. Many members have made impassioned arguments today about what they believe would make a fair system. However, members who participated in previous debates on this matter will be well aware that I must respectfully disagree with some of the proposals, particularly any that would create weaker criteria around indefinite leave to remain. Both petitions seek either to maintain the 5-year period or to provide exemptions to the rules that the government has set out regarding potential changes to the receipt of benefits. If we were to follow the suggestions of these petitions, it would leave the government's current proposals on settlement in tatters and wholly ineffectual. As my right honourable friend, the Shadow Home Secretary, said, when these policies were announced, there was much in these proposals that we support. That's partially because much of it was familiar from the amendments we put forward during the passage of the government's Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Act. Having spent many hours in Bill Committee discussing this legislation nearly a year ago, I can say with absolute certainty that the idea of a 10-year route to indefinite leave to remain was something we proposed and is something we continue to support. The right to citizenship and permanent residency should only go to those who've demonstrated a real commitment to the UK, and a 10-year period is clearly more reflective of the level of commitment that many in this country would accept as a reasonable timeframe, both in terms of contribution and time to settle. The British people want and demand tougher action on immigration. We believe this is a perfectly reasonable alteration to the existing system and that it puts in place more robust measures to ensure settlement is based on those making the long-standing contribution that many of us would expect. Even though we've seen falls in the levels of net migration, with the Office for National Statistics stating that decreases in work and study-related immigration continue to follow policy reforms from early 2024. The immigration figures remain historically exceptionally high, far greater than those seen before the pandemic. The government must take action to reduce immigration. That action must be taken imminently, recognising that the timeframe for these changes is dictated by a significant cohort. Between 2015 and 2020, total grants of settlement were never over 100,000. In the years either side of that, with the exception of 2010, the last year of the previous Labour government, they were never more than 200,000. I will.
Does he actually recall that between 2022 and 2024, even though the number of spaces in the care sector were deemed to be between 6,000 and 40,000, his government actually made available 616,000 visas for that.
I think we've reached there's been lots of passionate debate today, well-meaning suggestions that were passionately put about suggestions for changes or exemptions to government proposals. Some of them related to salary, some of them related to age, some of them related to people's grasp of the English language, some of them referred to people's community contributions, some of them referred to the makeup of a person's family, some referred to people's role in public services. Compassion is infinite, but this country's resources are not. We need a system that's fair for those UK citizens, including those who are currently struggling to get on the housing ladder. I'll carry on. Between 2015 and 2020, total grants of resettlement were never over 100,000. In the years either side of that, we saw, well, the last year of the previous Labour government, there were ever more than 200,000. In contrast, between 2026 and 2030, the government's earned settlement consultation sets out estimates showing far greater numbers of people being granted settlement. Its projections estimate that numbers, well, a peak could reach as high as 620,000 in 2028 and as many as 2.5 2 million receiving settlement over that period. This is simply not sustainable. I think we can all understand why people want to achieve settlement more quickly. No, you won't. But the policies we set must be based on what is right for our country. We should maintain our resolve and ensure that changes are enacted without creating loopholes or alternative routes beyond what the government has set out. The approach is wholly responsive to the current situation and reflects the fact that we need much stronger policies that deliver a fair system for British citizens and for those who have already legally settled in the UK. I'd like to re-emphasise the points raised when this policy was announced, such as ensuring thresholds for earnings to demonstrate net contribution set out in the consultation must be sufficiently high to ensure that those who are granted settlement contribute to this country. Furthermore, the government's own work has highlighted some of the mechanisms people use to take advantage of existing immigration rules. Therefore, I'd ask the Minister whether they've already been internally developing strong rules to ensure that adjustments to the baseline for behaviour, such as volunteering, represent a significant contribution. If we do not have sufficiently strong criteria for what constitutes working in the community, I fear these proposals would risk being undermined. The British people care fundamentally about fairness. The British people demand stronger borders. Immigration has been far too high for far too long. There are too many people who refuse to accept this simple fact. As has been said, if we fail to deal with this crisis, we'll draw ever more people onto a path that starts with anger and ends with hatred. We need an immigration system that is fair, proportionate, and that doesn't take taxpayers for a ride. For too long, the right to remain in the UK has been seen as an automatic entitlement. It's become a conveyor belt to citizenship, when UK citizenship should be a privilege that's earned through commitment and contribution to our country. The Conservatives believe that the UK is not a dormitory or a hotel. It's our home. We must make changes to indefinite leave to remain, both to respond to the levels of immigration and so that we can have a fairer system for the future. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Ms Lewis. A pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'm grateful today to the petitioners I know who are in the room this evening, to my honourable friend, the member for Folkestone and Hythe, also my constituency neighbour, for sponsoring this debate, and to every single member who has contributed. It will be difficult to name all because there has been so many, and I'm grateful for that. Both petitions today relate to the earned settlement proposal set out in A Fairer Pathway to Settlement, the command paper which the Home Secretary introduced to Parliament on the 20th of November. The proposed reforms represent the most fundamental change to the settlement system in decades and are currently subject to an ongoing public consultation that ends in 10 days on the 12th of February. We recognise how important this is to members, and indeed have seen that here today, as well as their constituents and, of course, migrants across the whole country. And we will and are listening to what is being said. I give way.
I've encouraged many of my constituents to participate in the consultation that finishes on the 12th of February. I'm concerned to hear that some of these changes may be coming in April this year. I know from past experiences that government consultations tend to take an awful long time for the government to consider the responses and then to come up with their own response to that. So how does that work in terms of the timing?
Thank you, honourable member, for her intervention. Some of the rule changes that we will be introducing are firm, and that will be laid out today in my speech, whereas much of it, for example, transitional arrangements, are very much being consulted on, and of course that will be listened to. If there's any further questions when I finish, then please do intervene nearer the end. Give way.
Could you just confirm whether the ones that are firm were also ones that were consulted about in the consultation document? And if so, why were they consulted about?
I thank the honourable Right Honourable Member for his considered intervention, and I will go through my response to the debate, which will lay out exactly what changes are being made and what is going to consultation. And happy to talk again at the end. We'll, of course, provide further details on the new settlement system, on how the new settlement system will work in due course after the consultation closes. But I hope members here today will appreciate that while the consultation is ongoing, I am somewhat restricted in what I can say, but I will endeavour to be as helpful and fulsome in my response as possible. This government, I won't give away, I'll make some progress so we can actually hear the meat of what I need to say. The government recognises and values the long-term contribution of migrants in the UK. This is not a deportation policy, and multiculturalism does absolutely make us great. Settlement here is a privilege and not a right. It cannot simply be a measure of how long someone has been in the UK, but rather by the contribution that they have made. If someone wants to settle in the country, they must contribute, integrate, follow our laws, and of course, learn our language. These are the principles that underpin a fair immigration system that the British public can have confidence in. Net migration ballooned under the previous government, and we are now faced with the prospect of 2.2 million people being eligible to settle between 2026 and 2030. Around 1 in 30 of every person in this country arrived between 2021 and 2024. These numbers are staggering. That is not what people vote for. And I'm surprised this hasn't been raised during the debate today. Such numbers do jeopardise our public services, our economy, the housing market, cohesion in local communities, and doing nothing is simply unacceptable. 1.34 million people are currently waiting on our social housing waiting list. This has gone up 200,000.
Order. Sitting is suspended for 15 minutes for a division in the House.
Wasn't expecting that.
Order, order. The sitting has resumed. The debate will now continue until 7:37 p.m. Minister.
Thank you, Chair. This debate's much better organised than what we've just been through, so thank you. Now, where was I? One.
Can I just say from the dispatch box right now, very clearly, that any changes to ILR will be voted on by the whole House, which will give all his colleagues who are here tonight the opportunity to express their genuine hostility to these proposals. So will we confirm that now?
Thank you for your question. His question. It's likely to be on rule changes. That decision hasn't been completely made, but you can, of course, express your frustration at me here in this room today. Where was I? 1.34 million are currently on the social housing waiting list. That's increased by 200,000 since 2020. Combine that with a potential 2.2 million people being eligible for settled status between 2026 and 2030. That puts a massive strain on our public services. We have already set out plans to increase the standard qualifying period towards settlement from 5 to 10 years. The earned settlement model will allow people to earn reductions for positive behaviour, such as working in a public service role and volunteering. We want to encourage this behaviour, which underlines the substantial contributions that many migrants make to our country. People today have spoken very well about stability within the country and what people have framed as moving the goalposts, apparently taking that stability away. But I do want to stress today that people who are here waiting to settle have access to education, have access to healthcare, to rent, they can buy a house, they can work, they can travel in and out of the country, and they have access to financial products. Like I said at the beginning of this, this is not about deporting, this is about creating a system that's based on contribution and integration and people who aren't committing crime. That's what the public expects. However, the new model will also impose penalties on people who claim public funds or who have breached immigration laws. These are not punitive measures. They are deterrents for those who are thinking about choosing a life of benefits when they can work or who fund criminal gangs to cross on a small boat, endangering their own lives in the process. This government will not continue with the status quo, considering the huge numbers we face. It is right that we implement a system that is fair, that rewards people who work to make this country a better place to live. As I'm sure members are aware, proposals that are not subject to consultation are 5-year discounts for 2 groups of people. Firstly, partners, parents, and children of British citizens. This reflects our commitment to treating our citizens fairly and their right to be in a relationship with whoever they choose, regardless of nationality. Secondly, British national overseas visa holders will receive the discount. We remain committed to the people of Hong Kong and the hundreds of thousands who have uprooted themselves and rebuilt their lives in the UK. Prior to this debate, I was at the APPG for Hong Kongers discussing exactly this. There are complex issues around income, family income, assets over income, and this is at consultation currently and will be announced when that decision has been made. It is vital that migration enriches our economy, but most importantly, that it enriches our local communities. The measures set out in the earned settlement model are ones that promote integration by raising the level of English required and demanding strict adherence to our laws. We will encourage integration and strengthen communities. Turning to the subject of the first petition, people who come to... Okay, fine.
one of the 4 pillars that he has set out in the consultation document in relation to integration is about volunteering. And it's been mentioned by a number of honourable members this afternoon that there is an arbitrariness to this, a subjective nature to the issue of volunteering. Who is going to certify the volunteer work that's been done? One can imagine a plethora of organisations being set up who will happily then be able to sign a chit that says so-and-so has volunteered for so many hours a week. How is this whole process actually going to operate? Because it seems arbitrary and subjective. What will the volunteering actually entail, and how will it have to be for the home community, or will it have to be for the community, the wider community?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for his very good point there. And this is something we in the Home Office have discussed in detail many, many times. And this is why it's at consultation. It is subjective, it is complex. And right now, stood here, I can't give you a definitive answer, but we will reach that and announce that in due course. Yes, I give one.
Minister, I must disagree with much of what you've said. Most immigrants in our country are not benefits grandiers, are not criminals. In fact, most of those that I've met in my constituency surgery are hard-working people. So I ask you, just last week, I had a woman and her husband and her children at my constituency surgery in tears because of the proposed policies that your government has put forward. And they tell me that both of them work full-time, and when one is working, the other one is caring. They pay into our tax system, they work most weekends, and yet they still struggle with their rent, with their food. So I ask, what point will they volunteer?
The Honourable Member for his question. You're right, most migrants are not criminals. Most migrants are thoroughly decent people, and that's recognised by this government and, of course, by the Home Office. On the volunteering side of things, this is still a consultation, and we will set out more detail in due course. It pains me to not give more detail now, but that's where we're at. Yes, I'll give one.
Ali Stodds.
Very grateful, Minister, for giving way. I wonder if you could also just clarify on a previous point, also perhaps potentially a confusion. Can you just clarify that it is most definitely not the case that all migrants go into social housing? In fact, it's pretty much the opposite a lot of the time. And in fact, all of those who have contacted me about this are not living in social housing, not that anyone should have any shame about living in social housing in the first place. And just secondly, he talked about firm elements of the government's proposals. Were they the ones about exemptions that he mentioned before, or are there other firm elements that he's going to be covering in the rest of his speech? Thank you.
Thank you, Member, for her intervention. No, I had not in any way implied that all migrants go into social housing. It's the increase of 2.2 million that would have access to that with the already 1.34 million waiting list, and our ambition to build just 1.5 million in that picture simply isn't enough, and that's just on social housing. What we are firm on at this point, yes,
Tony Vaughan.
I'm grateful to the Minister, but does it also not? Does the Minister actually have evidence about, how many people you think are going to switch from being, not claiming benefits to claiming benefits, or from not being in social housing to in social housing, or is this actually just a political judgment that's being made?
Refer to you. The convention's the same as in the main chamber.
I apologise.
You're referring to myself.
I apologise.
Minister.
For his point there. Look, what I'm not going to do is make up facts and figures on the spot, but it's not in my speech, so to give you an absolute fact. But what I can say is around 15% of all on universal credit are people who are not British nationals, and I think that's a reflection on the demand that it can put on our welfare system and, of course, on housing. I'm going to make some progress at this point. Turning to the subject of the first petition then, people who come to the UK to take up a job make an important contribution to our economy and our public services, filling essential skills and labour market gaps. But for too long, sectors have become reliant on them to fill those gaps and have not invested enough in our domestic workforce. The reforms we've set out in the Immigration White Paper last year are addressing that balance. We're reversing the long-term trend of an over-reliance on recruitment from abroad, we are instead increasing investment in skills and training for those in the UK. We implemented the first of those reforms in July last year, raising the skills threshold back to RQF 6, or roughly degree level occupations, leaving a short list of medium skilled occupations deemed critical to our industrial strategy and critical infrastructure. This restored the purpose of the skilled worker route and meant a reduction of more than 100 occupations. In December, we then raised the immigration skills charge by 32%. We are presently considering the Migration Advisory Committee's review of salary requirements before making further changes, and their upcoming review of the medium skilled temporary shortage list in the summer. I will take it.
Patricia Ferguson.
I'm grateful to the Minister for taking an intervention. Given that we reckon that there's some 30% of posts in the NHS and the care sector are taken up by people who have come from overseas, at what point will his reforms, those reforms that he's referring to just now, get us to the point where we can do without those 30% of people who are currently working in the health service? It strikes me that before we do anything along these lines, he needs to do an awful lot of work with the health department to make sure that balance can be had.
Thank my honourable friend for her point well made, and I can assure you that work is going on. I will come to that shortly in my response. I just want to address some of the questions that members have raised at this point. One of them is on an impact assessment. It's important that that is produced and made public, and that will come once the consultation is ended and once we've made all the final decisions. It's really important that we are matching the migration market with the skills market and, of course, the jobs market. And we are working hard in the Home Office across department to ensure that we're attracting the right workers to fill the jobs that we need to work. But I'll turn now to care workers. This government is immensely grateful to those who come to the UK with good intentions and continue to play a vital role in the adult social care sector. However, it is clear that international recruitment went too far and the route admitted unprecedented numbers of migrants and their families. As the right honourable member for Brent West, made well earlier, there was around 600,000 migrants coming to the country to fill just 40,000 roles in this sector.
Does he share with me a certain sense of irony that the former Home Secretary and the former Immigration Minister, who were responsible for giving those 616,000 visas out, have now joined Reform?
Right honourable friend for his point, very well made, and this place never ceases to amaze me. That's politics, I think. Some have raised during the debate the Unison's campaign around sector-wide visas. There is a commitment within the Immigration White Paper looking at how we make it easier for these workers to change employer. So that is being looked at seriously within the consultation. However, we do want to, of course, retain that ability to punish those dodgy employers who are dishing out visas when they clearly shouldn't be. This government is committed to providing opportunities for British workers. It's only right that we reduce reliance on international workers. And last year, the Health Secretary announced a £500 million investment in fair pay agreement for adult care workers, boosting the wages of those workers across England. But we still need to act to ensure that those who did arrive while the requirements were relaxed earn their settlement and demonstrate that their integration and economic contribution to the UK meets the standards that we're setting. On transitional arrangements then, the petition also touches on this, and that is to say whether the proposals will apply to those already on a pathway to settlement. Now, I know that this is a hugely important issue, as we've seen here today. We've asked for views on this in the consultation, And I hope members will understand that while I understand the keen interest here, and indeed the concerns of many individuals, I cannot say anything that could prejudge the outcome of the consultation. And this will be published, of course, when it closes. There's been some really strong points made in the room today around family income, gender pay gap, those who are more vulnerable, those who are disabled, on university fees, and of course on armed forces concessions. And all of this is being considered within the consultation, and there will be more detail. And I can only apologise that I can't give you more detail on that today. I'd like to assure members that we will listen to what people tell us in that consultation before deciding how a settlement will work. Turning now to the second petition, we're considering whether benefits should only be available to British citizens and not to those with settled status, as is the case now. And I know members have concerns about this. The government has a responsibility to British taxpayers to ensure their money is spent in a fair and equitable way. It's therefore right that we reassess the point at which migrants can access public funds. We know the challenges the country faces and which this government has inherited. One of the most significant ones is a serious lack of social housing. We're taking steps to tackle the challenge, but we must be realistic. I've already set out the number of people who are expected to apply to settle over the next 5 years and under our current system. All of those people could be eligible for benefits and social housing. I'm sure many of us here today will have constituents who have spent years on the waiting list for social housing. Continuing to add to that list will not solve the problem. I'll give way on that one.
Member makes a point of the potential and it's almost, if I may say with respect, scaremongering. Most of those people are hardworking citizens. Does he not believe that that kind of language actually raises the spectre? And it's precisely why we're sitting in this chamber. That kind of language does no justice to what's really happening out in the community.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for his point, which I disagree with. There's nothing in my language which is raising the temperature, and he would do well to listen to my praise of migrants and the contribution. And I've made it clear that I do not think that all of those that seek to settle would seek to access the welfare system and housing system, but it's quite clear that some would, and we're already at capacity with 1.3 million of our constituents on the social housing waiting list. I've lost my place. We would like to hear views from people on this measure, and so I would encourage anyone who is interested in providing those views to do so before the consultation ends. I'm conscious of time. Before I finish, I want to express my thanks again to my honourable friend and all members who have contributed today. These are sweeping reforms, and I understand the strength of feeling toward them. I've heard the points that have been raised here, which will all feed into this important consultation. It's important that everyone who may be affected by these proposals have a fair and equal opportunity to make their voices heard. As I've set out, the consultation is currently open to all until February the 12th, and further information on how to respond and provide views can be found on the government website. We want to ensure that any decision taken has a robust evidence base and a clear understanding of how people may be affected. And that is why this can be unclear to some of our constituents at this point. Clearly, these are issues of great significance, not only in the context of the immigration system, but for our nation itself. So I say to colleagues here and across the House that we understand the importance of our task. We are determined to get this right. And as I set out, we're proceeding with the seriousness and care that the public and Parliament rightly expect.
Tony Vaughan to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Newell. Thank you to the petitioners and the 330,000 signatories and all honourable members who've attended today to speak in this debate over the last 3 hours. I've been struck by the fact that every single speaker in this debate, backbench member who has spoken, spoke against the retrospectivity of those measures for those already here on the basis that they undermine basic British fairness. It would seem to me that there is no basis at all to deny to apply these rules even to those who have pending applications, given that they are even closer to the point where they would otherwise benefit. There have been various points made by members here today. The differential impacts on members of the same family of different ILR qualification rules was made by various members, the member for Sheffield Central, Leeds, South West and Morley, Tunbridge Wells. And it was also said that it could lock victims into situations of domestic violence, which is absolutely right in the situations that I've worked on in the past and have seen that that is a very real threat. Honourable members talked about the increasing settlement period, which would entrench exploitation being tied to a single employer. Many honourable members talked about that. The honourable members for Witney, Glasgow West and North, Montgomeryshire, Popham, Limehouse, City of Durham, Blyth and Ashington, Leicester South. And also, there was concern that these proposals will damage our ability to attract and retain the skills our country needs in a whole range of sectors: Edinburgh South West, Harrow West, Colchester, Ashford, St Neots and Mid Cambs, Falkirk, Stourbridge, and especially in the more remote parts of the country, like my constituency of Folkestone and Hythe, as well as Orkney and Shetland, Perth and Kinross, Campbell and Redruth and others. The Minister cited the additional numbers who could qualify for ILR, but in my view, the view that this is a burden that we need to relieve ourselves of, in my view, takes too short-term and narrow a view. It assumes that migrants will switch into benefits or reliance on local authority housing, and I cannot see any evidential basis for that assertion. The Minister talks about 15% of those on universal credit are non-nationals, but if you look at the numbers who are the UK population generally who is foreign-born, is 20%, and so it would seem that that group are less reliant on benefits than the UK population as a whole. These are matters which are across the chamber today. We've heard points about the damage to community cohesion and integration. These are very real points that must be taken into account very, very seriously. It's not about reducing immigration. I think it was only the Shadow Minister that wrongly suggested that it is. It's about the settlement and who gets to belong here after they've contributed for so long. And I just want to end on this point, and it was raised by other honourable members. I think it's really important, given the strength of feeling that we've heard today, that there is an opportunity for MPs to express their views about these measures if they are to proceed in any form. A motion passed by negative resolution, I would suggest, is not an apt way to do that, but it is important that everybody who has spoken today feeds into the consultation so the views that the government have reflect the views of the country as a whole. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered e-petition 727372 and 746363 relating to indefinite leave to remain. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.